Good morning, everyone, and welcome this morning. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes before we begin today's webinar. Wonderful. So I'm going to get started. Hello, good morning. Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Beth Blakely, and on behalf of myself and my co-presenter, Rosemary, we would like to thank you all for joining us this morning for today's event, Infant Safety at Home, Preventing Common Injuries, hosted by the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute. For your information, all participants' microphones have been muted and your cameras are turned off. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, we would encourage you to use the Q&A box located in the bottom center of your Zoom Windows taskbar. We have set aside some time at the end of the presentation to do a short question and answer period. The chat box is also available for you if you have any comments or any technical support questions during the presentation. As a reminder, this presentation is being recorded. A copy of the recording and a copy of the presentation slides will be emailed out to everyone that registered for this webinar. The recording will also be made available on the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute website in a few days. As a reminder, this presentation is intended for service providers that work directly with parents and caregivers of children under the age of 1. The goal of the presentation is to provide evidence-based resources and recommendations for reducing common infant injuries in the home, and will feature several resources that have been developed by the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute. During the first year of a child's life, they spend the majority of their time in and around their home, which is why we will be focusing on safety at home for today's presentation. Next slide, please. Before we begin the presentation, I would like to take a moment to orientate everyone to the Prevention Institute and acknowledge our privilege in sharing and working on these traditional lands. The Saskatchewan Prevention Institute provides services to all those living on treaty lands 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. The ancestral territories of the Nahiawak, Nahithawak, Nahinawak, Anishinaabeg, Nakaway, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, Dene, and the homeland of the Métis. We recognize that these lands are currently inhabited by Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, including many other First Nations and Inuit people, and acknowledge the importance of the treaties, the lasting impacts of colonization, and the continued inequities experienced. We are dedicated to moving forward on a shared path of reconciliation and partnership. We are all treaty people and are grateful to live, work, and play on this land. I would invite everyone to take a moment to reflect on your current location and your relationship with the lands, waters, air, and animals around you. As one of our participants has already done, I'd also encourage you, if you're comfortable, to share your name, your job role, and your location in the chat if you're comfortable doing so. Next slide. As I mentioned before, my name is Beth Blakely, and I am very pleased to be co-presenting this webinar with my wonderful colleague, Rosemary Churu. Rosemary, you want to give everyone a wave? Wonderful. So Rosemary is our perinatal and infant health program coordinator at the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute. She brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in maternal health and child health. She has done a lot of work to promote strategies and resources that support healthy pregnancies and infant development. She's also a loving mom to 2 young girls. As for myself, I've been at the Prevention Institute for over 6 years in a variety of roles, and this is my first year in the Child Injury Prevention Program Coordinator position. I've worked in the nonprofit field for over 10 years, a decade, and am passionate about addressing the social determinants of health, harm reduction, and fostering community development. I am also a mom to an energetic and creative 6-year-old boy and a proud auntie to many nieces and nephews. Thank you so much for everyone who's been sharing in the chat. I really appreciate it, and I'm so honored to have you all here with us. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the Prevention Institute, Rosemary and I are pleased to share one of our new promo videos that provides a brief overview of our organization. So I'll pass it over to Rosemary to share
Think about the
that.
role you play in creating environments and opportunities that support children, youth, and families. As a provincial nonprofit organization, we support service providers, educators, and communities to increase the health and well-being of children, from preconception through childhood. At the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute, this vision has guided us since 1980. We offer more than just information. Our unique approach turns research and evidence into practical, easy-to-use resources that will inform your work and can be shared with families and communities. We also provide education and training opportunities on a wide range of topics to help you stay at the forefront of best practices in your field. Visit us online to learn more about how we can support you in building healthier communities across Saskatchewan.
Imagine a world where every child grows up healthy, safe, and able to achieve their full potential.
Our goal is healthy children.
Thank you so much for that, Rosemary. So as you can see from this slide, the Prevention Institute works in a wide variety of areas. The Maternal and Infant Health Program promotes best practices for maternal health, as well as the prevention and reduction of infant illness, disability, and death in Saskatchewan. It aims to ensure the healthiest outcomes for a woman or pregnant person and their baby before, during, and after pregnancy. It focuses on areas such as safe sleep, environmental health, maternal healthy weight, and maternal oral health. The Child Injury Prevention Program aims to raise awareness of injury risks and best practices to reduce the number of injury-related deaths in children, as well as decrease the risk of life-altering injuries in children in our province. The program covers a wide variety of topics such as fall prevention, drowning prevention, brain injury and concussion awareness, pedestrian safety, unintentional poisoning, and more. Next slide, please, and I'll let Rosemary provide us an overview of what we're going to be covering today.
Thank you, Beth. So before we get into the details, let's quickly go over what we'll be covering today. So first, we'll talk about developmental milestones and how understanding your baby's growth can help you predict and prevent injuries. Next, we'll be looking at this safe sleep. We would discuss how to create a safe sleep environment and how practices to reduce the risk of sudden infant death syndrome, which we call the SIDS. Moving on, we will be talking about the crying and soothing. We will go over why babies cry and how to soothe them, and how caregivers can manage stress and find support. We'll also look at fall prevention. We will learn some steps to prevent falls, which are a leading cause of injury in young children. We'll also talk about drowning prevention, about the important safety precautions to prevent drowning incidents. And then at the end, we will open up the floor for any questions you might have.
Thank you so much for that, Rosemary. So to begin, I'm going to briefly outline some developmental milestones in infancy. As we all know, infants depend on the adults around them to provide safe, healthy environments so that they can explore, play, and grow. So learning and understanding the developmental stages of infants and young children is really one of the best ways to predict and prevent serious injuries from occurring. Kids can be full of surprises, as all of you know, especially parents out there. But knowing what to expect as a baby grows and develops, especially in those early years, can provide a lot of comfort to parents, as well as increase their confidence in keeping their child safe. So, using the developmental milestones, service providers can educate parents and caregivers to better recognize potential hazards in their environment and address injury risks before the infant develops a new physical skill, such as crawling, walking, or climbing. Although children will achieve developmental milestones at slightly different times and in variable orders, all children will go through these predictable stages. Next slide, please. So the physical skills that caregivers can expect their babies to develop by 6 months of age include rolling from front to back, controlling their head and neck movements, and this will include raising their head and chest while lying on their stomach, as well as baby stretching out and kicking their legs, whether they're lying on their back or their stomach. Next slide, please. From age 6 to 12 months, young children develop skills rapidly and they begin to explore their environment using these new skills. Caregivers and parents can expect their child to be rolling from front to back and back to front, for them to be sitting without support or assistance, for their baby to have the ability to support their body weight on their legs, and also increased control of their upper body and arms, which includes using their hands to explore objects and oftentimes putting items in their mouth. At this age, young children may also be able to crawl or walk and pull themselves to a standing position. Next slide, please. From 12 to 18 months, a child's ability to explore their environment independently skyrockets with the achievement of many milestones. These include the ability to crawl, scoot on their bum, pull themselves to standing, cruise furniture, so walking along furniture, holding on, as well as walking while they're holding onto adult's hand. Many children at this age can also stand briefly without support and may be able to take a few steps on their own. Young children will also start to climb stairs with help. 12 to 18-month-olds will also be finger feeding using their thumb and forefinger. Unfortunately, we won't be covering food-related hazards and tips to prevent choking and other food-related injuries in this presentation, but I would encourage folks to visit our website to learn more about this topic. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is just a brief overview of some of the major developmental milestones that parents and caregivers can expect. We don't have enough time to cover the developmental milestones and skills of older children during today's webinar. But if you would like to learn more, again, you can check out our website. I will also share in the chat one of our resources. It's called Injury Prevention Through the Ages and Stages. It's a fantastic resource for service providers as well as parents. So this document includes a list of common safety concerns by age, and it includes the associated injury prevention tips. Next slide, and I will pass it off to Rosemary to talk about safe sleep.
So, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Beth, for that. To start, let's talk about safe sleep and what safe sleep actually is. So safe sleep are those practices that help us to reduce the risk of sudden infant death syndrome and other sleep-related causes of infant death. It's really unfortunate that here in Canada, sudden infant death syndrome, which we call SIDS, is one of the leading causes of death in infants who are less than 1 year of age. And so between 2015 to 2020, there were about 1,700 deaths that happened every year. And out of those numbers, 110, which is like 1 in 15, happened during sleep. So that is why during this Safe Sleep Week, it's very important for us to talk about the importance of safe sleep and how to reduce the risk of SIDS. And so then, sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS like we call it, is a sudden, unexpected, and unexplained death of a baby who is less than 1 year old. So usually SIDS can happen anytime from birth to 1 year of age, but then the greatest risk happens between 2 months and 4 months. Why this happens, we don't really know. We don't really understand why, because even despite all the investigations that can be carried out, most times it cannot be explained. But then there's some things that we can do, which we call the safe sleep practices, that could help to reduce the risk of SIDS from happening. And so it's very important for us to know that whenever we're talking about safe sleep practices, it should be done all the time, wherever the baby is sleeping. So be the baby sleeping at home or at a caregiver's place, or even while you're traveling, you want to be sure that wherever the baby is laying his or her head to sleep is in the best environment possible. And so before we go through the recommendations for safe sleep, I want to also remind us that safe sleep practices should be followed all the time. So whether the baby is taking a short nap, a quick sleep during the daytime or during the night, it should be something that should be followed all the time. And it's also very important for us to know that we should share this information with everyone who cares for the baby. So we, the family member, your partner, the baby's caregiver or babysitter, you want to be sure that everyone is on the same page about the safe sleep practices. So now we're going over the safe sleep recommendations from the Canadian Pediatric Society. And so the first recommendation for safe sleep, which I would say the first golden rule, is always place the baby on their back to sleep for every sleep. So this is something that we cannot overemphasize about. It sounds very simple, but then it's one of the most effective ways to reduce the risk of SIDS. Okay, and research has shown that, studies have shown that when babies lay on their sides or on their tummy, it can increase the risk of suffocation. Okay, and it might sound very counterintuitive if you've heard something different from the older generation, maybe the grandparents or parents, but then the research is certain, the research is clear. Placing the baby on the back to sleep is the safest position to lay your baby to sleep. And it makes a great difference in preventing SIDS, because when babies lay their backs to sleep, on their backs to sleep, it opens up their airways and helps them to breathe easily without having to labor to breathe. But when babies sleep on their sides, on their tummy, it can increase the risk of SIDS because the mattress could press against the baby's face and increase the risk of suffocation. So you want to avoid doing that. And this is all about the baby's sleeping surface. You may have heard about the saying, decorate the room and not the crib. It's a great reminder that when it comes to baby sleeping environments, our priority should be the baby's safety and not aesthetics. It may be very tempting to make the crib very cozy with cute soft animals, blankets, bumper pads, and pillows, but then they all pose a risk or dangers to the baby's health or baby's sleep. So the most important thing that you want to do when with the baby's crib is to put a firm and flat mattress, no soft bedding, no blankets, because the soft beddings can mold on the baby's face and increase the risk of suffocation or SIDS. Okay, so you want to keep the crib very simple. When it comes to baby's cribs, less is more, bare is better. So all you need is a firm and flat mattress and a fitted sheet. So just keep it simple, okay? And then some parents may not have a crib or a bassinet right away, or maybe they need something portable for travel or short-term use. And then you're considering alternatives like the box, the basket, or the drawers. These options may work, but it's really important to remember that they don't have specific safety standards like the cribs or the bassinets. So you want to be very careful on how you use them. And so if you must use options like this, you want to be sure that they are placed on the floor and never on a raised surface like a table or a counter, because this can increase the risk of falls and obviously increase the risk of SIDS. So you want to be sure that you're placing these alternatives on the floor, and it has to be on a flat surface too. You also want to avoid using too much padding or soft material. So just like the crib, you want to still keep it very bare, okay, so that it will not increase the risk of SIDS, because soft materials like the blankets or toys can increase the risk of suffocation. Now, overheating is something that we need to also watch out for because they can increase the risk of SIDS. The safest way to dress your baby for sleep is with a simple fitted sleepwear like the sleep suit or the sleeper, because this would help to keep the baby comfortable without having to add too much warmth to the baby. So you want to keep it not too hot, not too cold. So would say if the room feels comfortable for you, then it should also feel comfortable for the baby too. Babies don't need hats indoors. Indoor hats, when babies wear hats, it could trap heat and cause overheating. So you want to save the hats whenever you go out during a cooler weather, but not indoors. Babies also need to wear blankets because blankets can increase the risk of suffocation. If the baby moves the blanket, it can move to the face and block the airways. You want to be sure not to use blanket because blankets too can also increase overheating in babies. Some parents use things like the sleep sack. If you ever decide to use sleep sacks, that is fine when it's the right fit. If it's too loose or too tight, it can also pose a risk to babies' health. So if you're using a sleep sack, you want to be sure that it's not too loose, because if it's too loose, baby could go down it and sleep through it, and it could increase suffocation or even increase overheating. And if it's too tight, it could restrict the baby's movements, the legs, and which is dangerous if baby tries to roll over. And also some parents choose to use swaddling. Swaddling helps to keep the baby calm, but if it's not done properly, it can also pose a risk because blankets can tangle the baby, or it can move to the face and block the breathing, block the nose or the mouth. So you want to be very careful that you're using it the right way. So if you choose to ever use swaddling, you want to use a lightweight blanket. I want to make sure that it stays away from the baby's nose or mouth. You also want to leave enough room for the baby's legs and hips, for enough legs and hip movement. You also want to keep the hands free so that they can communicate their needs. Like when they are hungry, some babies put their hands in their mouth or flinch their fist. So you want to give them that chance to communicate that. And so breastfeed if you can. Breastfeeding is not just the only way to nourish babies, it also has protective benefits. The breast milk has immunoglobulins, antibodies that help to protect the baby. And we know that when babies are born, they are still trying to build up their immune system. And so the breast milk helps to augment that. And studies have shown that when babies who pass away from SIDS were often more likely to have had a minor infection in the days before their death. So breastfeeding can help to reduce this risk. And then no smoking around the baby. Smoking during pregnancy is one of the biggest risk factors for SIDS. 1 out of 3 SIDS deaths could be prevented if pregnant women did not smoke. And the best choice is not smoking at all. But even if you reduce the frequency of smoking, it can also reduce the risk of SIDS. Smoking is both first-hand and second-hand smoking is not safe because it has toxic chemicals which can affect the baby's body cells. It can affect the brain development and the lung development, which can impact the way the baby breathes and increase the risk of SIDS. So smoking is dangerous to babies both before and after birth. And so it's very important that we keep the environment where the baby is smoke-free at all times. So even if the parent or anyone smokes, we want to be sure that the person is not close to the baby and the baby's sleeping environment. So you need to keep baby's sleeping environments smoke-free at all times. And then immunization is very important because it helps to protect the baby from life-threatening diseases and can also reduce the risk of SIDS. So you want to be sure that you the baby gets all their recommended vaccinations and on time. And then this is for families who have multiples like twins, triplets, and quadruplets. It's very important that each baby has their own sleep surface. Babies should never share a crib, as this can lead to suffocation risk, especially when babies try to move around during their sleep. It's very safer for babies to have their own sleeping surface because the baby can roll over to the other child, and this will increase the risk of accidents or suffocation. So you want to be sure to use separate crib for your twins. And then it's very important for us to know that car seats are designed for travel and not for sleep. So while it's very common for babies to sleep off in the car, it's important for us to also know that when we get to our destination, we should take out the baby from the car seat and lay in the baby's crib. Babies have heavy heads, which when it falls forward, it could restrict their breathing. Babies also have poor neck control when they are still very young. So you want to avoid leaving the babies to sleep in the car seat when you're not in the car. So when babies, always use the car seats for travel, but as soon as you get to your destination, you want to be sure to move the baby to a bassinet so that the baby can sleep properly and better, because car seats are not alternatives to the cribs or the bassinets. And then room sharing is highly recommended for the first 6 months of life. So having your baby's crib in your room close to your bed makes nighttime easier. It reduces the risk of SIDS because you can keep an eye on your baby, you can monitor their breathing, and you can respond to their needs more quickly. But then this does not mean bed sharing. It just means that your baby's crib is in the same room with you and you have your own sleeping surface. But bed sharing where the baby shares the same bed as you is not safe. Bed sharing can lead to accidental suffocation, especially if the parent is tired. You can roll over on the baby and the baby could get trapped, and this can increase the risk of SIDS. So you want to avoid bed sharing. If you look at this picture, we have a baby in their crib and the mom is on her own bed, which is great because this is room sharing and not bed sharing, exactly what we recommend. But then what is wrong with this picture? If you look closely, you see that the baby is laying in the crib and there are like blankets and bumpers. This is not safe because it can still increase the risk of SIDS. So even while you're room sharing and not bed sharing, you want to still follow the safe sleep recommendations of keeping the bed bare. So all you need is still the firm fitted mattress with a fitted sheet. And so also if you look at the crib and the bed, they are too close together, which can also pose a safety hazard. If the parent bedding gets into the crib, it can also cause suffocation. So you want to be sure to keep the crib a little bit away from the bed to reduce the risk of this happening. And so even while we don't encourage bed sharing, if for any reason you ever choose to bed share, these are some guidelines you want to take so that you can make sleeping safer. You want to always place the baby on their back to sleep. You want to also use a firm mattress, no water beds or air mattresses, because I also want to keep the bed free from soft items like pillows, blankets, or stuffed animals, because they pose a risk to suffocation. You also want to position the baby on the outermost part of the bed so that the baby wouldn't get sandwiched between adults or parents. You never want to leave the baby alone, and also no other children or pets in the bed. You want to ensure that the baby can move freely without any obstructions. And you also want to use lightweight sheets to avoid overheating. But then there are certain situations where bed sharing should definitely be avoided. The first one is if the baby is less than 4 months old, bed sharing should be avoided because this is a critical time for babies. Remember that we talked about that the first 4 months is like when SIDS is on the highest risk. So you want to avoid that. Babies at that age are very vulnerable to getting SIDS. So you want to place babies on their own crib or bassinet. Also, if a baby was born prematurely or has a low birth weight, you want to avoid birth sharing because babies at this age are smaller and they have very delicate bodies and also very vulnerable. So you want to give them extra caution and care by placing them on their own sleeping surface. Also, if the parent smokes or have ever smoked during pregnancy, you want to avoid bed sharing. If the parent is excessively tired or under the influence of substances or medications, this can impair your ability to care for your baby and put you in the risk of rolling over the baby, and this can create suffocation or accidents. So you want to also avoid bed sharing. You also want to avoid bed sharing if you're sleeping on the soft surfaces like couches. These babies can get trapped in between the gaps, so you want to avoid it. And also, definitely, if you're not the baby's primary parent or primary caregiver, you also want to avoid bed sharing. And so all of this information that I discussed today, they're all found in our resources and they're available on our website. And these resources are all evidence-based. I'm Beth to be sharing the links in our chat box. And so now I'll be handing it over to Beth to discuss coping and crying babies and how to reduce stress.
Thank you so much for that, Rosemary. And I did include in the chat a link to our Safe Sleep for Your Baby, Lower the Risks of SIDS booklet. So a lot of the important information that Rosemary shared can be found in that resource. And as she said, on our website as well. So next we are going to be talking about crying and soothing. So crying is very normal, and some babies will cry more than others. Typically, infant crying will peak at about 2 to 3 months of age and declines by 5 months of age. The reasons for babies crying is that they're trying to tell you that they want or they need something. Oftentimes, it's because they're hungry, they're overtired, they need a diaper change, they're uncomfortable, such as bunched up clothes or in an uncomfortable position, or they just want to be comforted with that physical closeness. Sometimes babies will also cry because they want to release some tension. Some ways that parents and caregivers can soothe and calm a crying baby includes feeding them, checking baby's diaper, comforting them with snuggles or a gentle back massage, wrapping or swaddling their baby. And again, you want to make sure that you're mindful of the recommendations and concerns that Rosemary brought up about swaddling, what type of material you're using and how you're swaddling. Some other ways to calm and soothe a crying baby would be to give them a warm bath, or also playing music, singing, or humming a lullaby to the baby. Some infants, and I know my son was in this category, was soothed by gentle motions. So caregivers can also try to rock their baby gently, go for a walk in the stroller, a carrier, or a sling, or even going for a car ride. And again, as Rosemary mentioned, it's important to remember to remind caregivers that car seats are not meant for sleep. And so if your child does fall asleep, to transition them into their crib or another safe sleep space. Parents and caregivers often know what types of soothing techniques work best for their child, and there isn't going to be a one technique that works every single time. There also are medical reasons why an infant may be excessively fussy. This could include reflux, constipation, colic, abdominal pain, or other medical issues. We won't be discussing those today during this presentation, but if you do support a family that is experiencing this, we would recommend that you get them connected with a local healthcare provider to help them with any of those concerns. Next slide, please. So for parents and caregivers, sometimes it's really easy to figure out why their baby is crying, and sometimes it can be more challenging. This can make them feel frustrated, angry, alone, and this can be exacerbated when the caregiver themselves is feeling tired, ill, or is lacking supports. It's important that we remind caregivers that their baby crying doesn't mean that the baby is mad at them or that they don't like them. Crying is also evolutionarily supposed to be an annoying sound. There's no magic answer or one solution that's going to calm baby every single time, but as I said, with a little bit more experience, caregivers tend to start figuring out which of those techniques tend to work for their infant. If you are supporting a caregiver that really struggles with calming their baby, it's important to remind them that it is okay to ask for help and they're not alone. If they feel overwhelmed or upset by the crying and the soothing techniques that I mentioned are not working, so feeding, changing the diaper, going for a walk or having that movement, as well as talking and singing to the baby, there are some steps that you can recommend that the caregiver follows. It's important to remind parents and caregivers that shaking, hitting, or throwing a baby in a moment of frustration can cause serious long-term health consequences. So instead, in those moments of frustration, recommend that caregivers follow these steps. So number one, gently place their baby in a safe space. So this could be a crib or a bassinet, and allow the baby to cry a few minutes alone. Allowing them to cry for a few minutes on their own is not going to harm the baby. Number two, have the caregiver leave the baby's room before their emotions get out of control and they're feeling overwhelmed. Number three, encourage the caregiver to acknowledge their emotions and to use techniques to help calm themselves down. So this could include taking a short shower, moving their body, counting to 100, squeezing a soft pillow, writing down some things that they're grateful for, or even calling a trusted family member or friend. Number four, make sure that the caregiver or someone is checking on the baby every 10 minutes to ensure that they're still safe. To help caregivers while they're focusing on calming themselves down, it's recommended that they set an alarm for 10 minutes and no more than 15 minutes so that they are still having those regular check-ins with baby. Number five, when they do go to check on the baby, make sure that the caregiver has their emotions under control before they pick baby up. If they're not feeling calm, you can move to step 6, which is repeating steps 2 to 4 as needed. And next slide, please. So again, it's important that caregivers and parents know that they should never shake, hit, or throw a baby. Doing so, as I said, can cause serious long-term health consequences. These can include blindness, brain damage, and death. Babies have weak neck muscles and heavy heads, so even just a few seconds of forceful shaking can cause damage. If you are supporting a family that does struggle with feeling overwhelmed with their babies crying, we do have some resources on our website. One in particular that I would recommend is one of our brochures, which I'll share in the chat. It's a brochure called When Your Baby Can't Stop Crying. So it includes the steps that I mentioned before on the previous slide, as well as some more soothing techniques that caregivers can try. It also includes a spot that caregivers can write down some ideas for support. So you can work through this brochure with families that you're supporting. If a caregiver is frequently feeling overwhelmed by the crying and are frustrated, as a healthcare provider and a service provider, some things you can also do is suggest that they create a list of family members or friends that they can call for support. Determine if there is any local public health nurses or community health representatives that can support or guide them. Caregivers can also make a list of techniques that help them calm down in the moment. And if it is an ongoing concern, they can make a plan to help manage their feelings long term so that they have fewer instances in the future of feeling that overwhelm, anger, or frustration at babies crying. And next slide, please. So for this next section, I'm going to be providing some tips to prevent fall-related injuries as well as drowning in young children. So I'm just sharing in the chat. All of these recommendations and more are found in our home safety tips booklets. So there's 3 booklets in this series. The one that I shared in the chat is our booklet that touches on information for children from birth to 1 year of age. There's also a second booklet that covers tips for children from ages 1 to 4. And then we have our last book in the series that is for children ages 5 to 9. And I see that we do have someone that raised your hand. We will be doing questions at the very end. So if it is a question, I would encourage you to add it to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you have another comment or having issues, please share it in the chat and Rosemary can take a look at it and hopefully address it. Thanks. Okay, so we'll start with falls. So falls are the leading cause of hospitalization due to injury in children in Saskatchewan. Common causes include falling off stairs, off play equipment, from a parent or caregiver's arms, and most commonly off furniture. So this includes beds, change tables, as well as high chairs. Falls can happen very quickly, and they often occur at a time when an infant or young child is developing a new skill, so those developmental milestones that I mentioned earlier. There are some simple safety measures that we can take to ensure that infants don't suffer a serious injury due to a fall. So I'm going to highlight 6 today. So the first one is that on any height above the floor, always keep your eyes and a hand on baby. This includes change tables, couches, beds, and when they're on play equipment, so swings, raised platforms, as well as slides. Number 2, have all items needed and within arm's reach before changing baby's diaper. So whether that's a change of clothes, your wipes, your ointment, have all of that within arm's reach. Number 3, use the safety straps on equipment. So oftentimes strollers and high chairs will include those. And make sure that you remember that these safety straps are not a substitution, rather, for supervision. Number 4, do not buy, sell, or use baby walkers. So these items are not approved by Health Canada and are unsafe. This is because they allow babies to move quickly and to reach dangerous places that they otherwise would not be able to reach. Most commonly, this is stairs. Number 5, when baby can push up to their hands and knees, it's recommended that you lower the crib mattress to the lowest height. Typically, this occurs around 6 months of age. And finally, number 6, use wall-mounted safety gates at the top and bottom of stairs. Pressure-mounted safety gates are not recommended as they may release if a child pushes or falls against them. And also supervise children when they're learning to go up and down the stairs and keep stairs free of clutter to ensure that there's no risk for falls for anyone, including the adults. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about drowning prevention. So drowning is a leading cause of injury-related death for children ages 0 to 9 in our province. Most incidences in infant and young children happen in the home, with bathtubs and pools being the most common location. These incidences are also most likely to occur when the supervising adult is either distracted or absent. Children of all ages are naturally curious about the water, but infants and young children in particular have limited balance and coordination skills, and they have those disproportionately large heads, so that puts them at a greater risk of falling into the water. Children of all ages can drown silently and quickly in less than 2.5 centimeters or 1 inch of water. So it's important that parents and caregivers implement simple safety measures to prevent drowning. So I'm going to go through 7 tips again for this section. So number 1, while bathing baby, remember to keep your eyes and hands on them, and direct supervision is key. Place everything you need within arm's reach. Again, those washcloths, soap, clean clothes. And for younger babies, make sure you're holding their head and supporting their neck until they're able to do that on their own. Number 2, avoid the use of bath seats or bath rings. These products have been attributed to a number of drowning incidences in infants, and they're not recommended by Health Canada. Number 3, always keep infants and young children within arm's reach when in or around water. So this includes paddling pools and wading pools. Older children should not be the ones supervising. Number 4, watch for standing water at home. So this includes outdoor ponds and pet dishes. And make sure that you're draining water out of sinks and bathtubs immediately after use. And also completely emptying and turning over any wading pools or paddling pools that you have in your backyard when there's no adult supervision and when they're not in use. Number 5, you can close bathroom doors when they're not in use, as well as use a doorknob safety cover, such as the one on the screen, and install a toilet seat lock. Number 6, if you do have a backyard pool, ensure that there's a 4-foot high fence on all 4 sides of the pool and that it cannot be accessed by children. If you do have a gate, make sure that is self-latching and self-closing. And finally, number 7, ensure that young children wear properly fitted life jackets or personal flotation devices when they're playing in shallow water, near pools or beaches, and on boats. In Canada, there is actually no infant life jacket or personal flotation device that is approved for infants who weigh less than 9 kilograms or 20 pounds. So young children, young infants should not be on boats. So anyone less than 9 kilograms or 20 pounds. Next slide, please. So for infants and young children, the best and most effective strategy to reduce the frequency and severity of all types of injuries in the home is supervision. So injuries are not accidents, and most serious injuries and injury-related deaths in children are actually predictable and preventable. So as I mentioned earlier, injuries often happen when a caregiver is not present or they're not actively supervising their child. So we want direct supervision. What that means is that the caregiver is within arm's reach and looking at their child. We also want active supervision, which means there's no distraction and that the caregiver's focus is only on the child. As a parent myself, and I'm sure most of you as well, I know it's easy to say that a caregiver needs to actively supervise their children, but we know in real life, we're going to have competing priorities that pull our attention in every direction. So the goal of supervision is to find that right combination of physical closeness to the child, as well as attention to what the child is doing. This combination is going to change depending on the child, their age, and the activity. For infants, though, they often require the greatest degree of physical closeness and attention. It's also important that we remind parents and caregivers that minor injuries like bumps and bruises are going to happen. They're normal and they're part of growing up, and our goal is not to bubble wrap our children. What we want is for parents and caregivers to focus on preventing injuries that are serious in nature and could alter their child's quality of life in some way. And so with that, I'll pass it over to Rosemary and we will open the floor for some questions.
So thank you all for listening and being here today. We hope you found the presentation helpful. So we open up for questions. If you have any questions that you like to ask, please use the Q&A box that is located at the bottom center of your Zoom Windows taskbar, and we will do our best to answer them.
Thank you so much. So we do have one question from Kim. So I'll read that out, and this one is for you, Rosemary. So Kim asks, are there specific recommendations around the sleep sacks that are weighted on the chest for calming? Are they discouraged? Is their use discouraged?
I don't know of any specific recommendations, but I know that weighted sleep sacks are discouraged because they can cause overheating of the baby and can also cause to reduce oxygen saturation. So that is why it is not encouraged. So I'm not aware of any specific recommendation that allows us to use weighted sleep sacks. I hope that answered the question.
Thanks for that, Rosemary. And yeah, you will see a lot of those kind of home remedies as well, like filling up a oven mitten with rice and putting that on baby's back to mimic. So yeah, those things they obviously aren't tested and aren't recommended for use. Do we have anyone else with questions? Just checking the chat to make sure I didn't miss anything. And it looks like we have people from across Canada, so thank you so much for being here with us. Rosemary and I will also have our phone number and our email at the end of this presentation. So if you, for whatever reason, do have a question that you think of after the fact, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to help you out in any way that we can. Maybe leave it for another minute to see if there's any more questions. And then Rosemary can just provide a quick summary of some of the resources that we shared in case you wanted to write those down or get more information about them. I don't see anything else, so Rosemary, if you want to go to the next slide.
So these are some of our resources. All what we talked about today during the presentation can be found on our website. And the codes that you see here on the screen, they are the numbers to help you pull out the resources faster. And they're all on the website.
Slide, Rosemary.
And so thank you everyone for joining us today. When you close the windows, you will be directed to a link where you can complete a short survey evaluation of this session. Completing these evaluations help us create programming and resources that support you in your work, and we appreciate the time it takes to complete them. And as a reminder, a copy of the presentation slides and the webinar recording will be emailed to everyone registered for this event in the next week or so. And so thank you everyone and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. I will stop recording, so if anyone would like to stay a little bit later and has a question that they didn't want included, you're more than welcome to do that. Thanks again, everyone.